General Manager Stan Bowman said this morning, it's really about finding the right mixture, and it will be a new-look offense for the Edmonton Oilers come the 25-26 NHL season. Well, it's the same look here on the panel presented by Sportsnet with Jack Michaels and Bob Stauffer providing their insights as the offseason continues since the opening of free agency. Jack, 2 signings for the Edmonton Oilers. Let's begin with Andrew Mangiapane. 2-year deal, $3.6 million AAV. Former 35 goal scorer. I ask you, how does he change the complexion of the Oilers' top 6? Because the general manager said he's expecting him to play in the top 6.
Well, I mean, he is, kind of the next man up in terms of, I think the Oilers took a few swings in 2024 that did not pan out as they hoped in terms of playing in the top 6 with, the likes of Leon Draisaitl and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Connor McDavid and Zach Hyman. I think it's quite possible that Vasily Podkolzin is going to play, the lion's share of his ice time alongside Leon Draisaitl. So that leaves a spot for one winger, and Kasperi Kapanen's going to have something to say about it, but Andrew Mangiapane will be afforded every opportunity to do what Skinner and Arvidsson could not do, and that is contribute on a regular basis. You mentioned the 35 goals. He did that in 2022. He has not scored 20 goals in a season other than that one. So this is a major opportunity for him. He's at, age 29, arguably the peak of his career. He was suppressed a bit in Washington's lineup. And, I think Edmonton in the last couple of years has had a couple of forwards that has been suppressed in their lineup because of how much talent is in the top 6. So certainly Mangiapane will have every opportunity to explore the possibility of reaching, higher limits. I mean, he had a good season in the 56-game season, he would have surpassed the 20-goal barrier. So he's certainly a guy who can put the puck in the net. The one thing I like about him is, as compared to Skinner and Arvidsson, is he's got a little bite to his game. He's a bit of an agitator. He can kill penalties. He can play both wings. He played a lot on the right side in Calgary because they, like Edmonton, didn't have a ton of right-handed shots, in their top 6. So the versatility, I think, offers a real promise that Mangiapane can be moved around and not necessarily just play with Draisaitl either. I think he'll be in the top 6 and afforded every opportunity to excel in the top 6, but I don't necessarily think it'll be one locked-in position.
Yeah, I think that he's got a better chance to succeed, frankly, than a couple guys that had a window last year for a year. It's ironic. I think Matt Savoy is going to be joining Andrew Mangiapane possibly on a line with Leon Draisaitl. And I think that we've been looking for. It just shows you how great a player Leon is. That he had a 50-goal season last year, but. Because I think there's a chance we might see Podkolzin with Trent Frederic and Kasperi Kapanen on a little bit more of an identity line on the third line if they do indeed decide to try Trent Frederic at center. They battled hard on Mangiapane. They weren't the only Canadian team that was trying to secure his services. I'm led to believe that he left, a significant amount of money on the table. But when a team has Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, when the Athletics ranking the Edmonton Oilers #1 at center, that's enticing for a lot of players out there. And Mangiapane is going to have a wonderful opportunity to capitalize that, Tony, in the next 2 seasons.
And on July 2nd, it was Curtis Lazar inking a 1-year deal at the league minimum of $775,000. Now, he kind of clumps into this group that I would say that Noah Philp is in it, the aforementioned Matt Savoy, guys like Kapanen. This basically, with all of the departures that the Oilers have seen with Kane, Arvidsson, Perry, Brown, that does open up opportunities, Jack, for these guys to fulfill some certain niches and some roles. How do you kind of look at the internal competition heading into training camp in September?
Well, I think the biggest thing is Philp and Lazar right away. I mean, that's probably a competition for potentially fourth-line center, and that enables you to play Janmark on the wing rather than have Janmark as your fourth-line center, which is a possibility. It's interesting. I mean, I think Bob and I have different reads a little bit on the roles. I don't necessarily put Matt Savoy in the top 6 to stay. I think Matt Savoy might very well be on a third line with like an Adam Henrique and a Trent Frederick. A little bit of speed and playmaking ability. I still think, when you're Leon Draisaitl, you have an appreciation that the pucks that are recovered by a guy like Vasily Podkolzin, I think you're going to see that mix. But that's, again, where Mangiapane, the bite to his game, comes into play. And also, I would not rule out the possibility, while we're talking about roles, of a potential reuniting of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Leon Draisaitl. I mean, I think you could see that, and potentially a Mangiapane sliding up as high as first-line left wing with Connor McDavid. That's kind of what I meant about, I don't think Mangiapane is going to be pigeonholed in any one particular role. For me, Lazar and Philp is an interesting competition. And also, the one guy we've got to talk about is a guy that, maybe Bob knows more than I do, but David Tomasek. The Oilers, have taken swings at some promising players in Europe in years past. And Tomasek now has been a guy that's thoroughly researched. He's led all of Europe in scoring the last couple of years. And what a bonus it would be if he proved to be a guy worthy of top 9 consideration, and also yet another player with the versatility that you look for in this Edmonton lineup. That's the one thing that I really got out of Stan Bowman's conversation. Tony, you talked about it. He's not only looking for guys who can contribute in a wide variety of different roles, but again, guys that can shuffle up and down the lineup, maintain the internal competition you talk about, and most importantly, allow the Oilers to grow from within, so that if there's one big swing you can take at the deadline to perhaps separate yourself from a Vegas, a Dallas, or a Colorado, you have the ability to do it.
Yeah, specific to Lazar, the Oilers didn't really have a fourth line right shot option at center in the playoffs. Philp maybe not quite ready yet, though I think that he's certainly going to get a long look in the preseason.
Is it Philp versus Lazar, Bob?
It is, but remember, Lazar can play left wing and right wing, even though he's spent a lot of time in left wing as a right shot. And then in terms of Philp, he can play center or right wing as well. And I think Jack alluded to something that I don't think there's any debate about. I think the Edmonton Oilers are going to try to find a way to accrue some cap space so that they can make an addition. If you end up at, say, $2 million of cap space when you declare your roster at the start of the season, and you're able to maintain that, that's $8 million by the trade deadline. That's a significant add if you can make it. So that's where Lazar coming in at a league minimum, Philp coming in at a league minimum and not being qualified where he would have automatically received a 10% increase on his salary. That's a big deal for Edmonton because it's going to help give them a couple more options there. So that's something that we should be watching as well.
What's your read on Tomasek, by the way? Leading scorer in the Swedish Hockey League. He put up over 50 points.
Of all of the guys the Oilers signed out of Europe and out of the NCAA, Tomasek is by far the closest. I got to be I don't think he's here to play on the fourth line. I think he's here to play in the top 9. So I'm going to be really intrigued to see where he fits. A little bit of a late bloomer. Yeah. I'd like to tell you I've watched a ton of video on him. I have not. But this is one where the Oilers, they don't have the draft capital, so they have to find players to help, fill out the rest of their roster. There's a window and opportunity to be a slam dunk home run. If he pans out at all, it's a stroke of genius. And it's also a bit of during the Four Nations face-off, there were some executives that, they went on holidays, right? Stan Bowman, he went to Sweden.
Yeah.
To
and he got to work.
And he got to work on Tomasek. So I don't have a huge gauge on him. But, if you can score in the Swedish league,
it's not an easy league to score.
Usually it translates decently well.
At 29 years old as well. I mean, it's not like he's a young guy still finding his way. That experience hopefully kind of transitions.
And he's not a small guy.
Well, and I also think Tomasek might be ideal for the other players that Edmonton is counting on in its top 6. What I mean by that is Mangiapane has always been a streaky player. And Matt Savoy,
he's unproven.
He's unproven, and I generally think as he gets started, he's going to be a bit streaky too. He's going to have some games where he lights it up, and then he's going to have
That's
some
only
games
natural.
quiet. So when you bring in a 29-year-old accomplished player like Tomasek, generally speaking, he's going to bring the same game. So if one of those two players we talked about is having an off night, that's where Tomasek, that's where the flexibility, that's where the versatility matters for this Edmonton squad. And they already have guys that can play center and wing, like Frederick and Henrique. So what I like about the grouping of forwards beneath the obvious ones, obviously, again, we're always talking McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Hyman. They can play different positions, and they can prop one another up if a guy's having an off night.
All right, a couple of quick hitters before we close out the panel presented by Sportsnet. Bob, for you, goaltending. The Edmonton Oilers, of course, they were active in that department over the last week or so. What's your thought and feeling right now on July 2nd?
Well, let's see what happens for the start of the regular season. I think they're comfortable. You know, Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard, that tandem got them to the 7th and 6th game of the Stanley Cup.
Back-to-back Cup finals.
Right, like Stuart Skinner outdueled Jake Ottinger. We sat
2 years in a row.
2 years, like 922 to 901 2 years ago, and 924 to 853 last year. So I think that the Oilers, if they have to, it's not the end of the world. I know not all the fans want to hear that, but it is certainly an option if they come back with the same two guys.
And Calvin Pickard outplayed Aiden Hill in the first 2 games of the Vegas series and outplayed a Vezina finalist in Darcy Kemper in the LA series. I mean, we can't overlook that either. Apologies to Stuart Skinner, but he was part of a tandem. Yeah. And Pickard outplayed 2 significant guys, both Stanley Cup winners, in Aiden Hill and Darcy Kemper. So that's how I feel about the tandem. And quite frankly, Tony, this was maybe not the year. I think back to the summer of 2022, and there were some guys, Jack Campbell and Ville Husso, I think were the top 2 that summer. Wow. And both were in the minors inside of a year and a half, and both got significant contracts. Sometimes, and I go back to something my first boss told me back in 1997, sometimes the best moves are the ones you don't make. Stan Bowman he obviously didn't see a move that made sense with respect to the goaltending. So rather than try to force something that's not there, we always get on players sometimes for doing it. Well, managers sometimes are guilty of the same thing. He didn't force something that wasn't there. Doesn't mean it's a dead issue, but it means that sometimes the best move you can make is a prudent one, which means no move at all.
All right, the other quick hitter, Connor McDavid's contract, of course, a big checkpoint for Stan Bowman, Jeff Jackson, and the rest of the brass here in Edmonton. Jack, I'll let you begin on your feeling of Connor McDavid, where he may be at right now, what he's kind of assessing, and us expecting him to take his time with this.
Well, first of all, I've had no conversations on that subject with Connor McDavid whatsoever. And I will defer to Bob in terms of the general feeling of the cap. I would say this, if I'm an Edmonton Oilers fan, I would prepare myself for the very real possibility that Connor McDavid's contract extension is in the 3 to 4 year range as opposed to the max. We live in a different world. To quote one of my favorite movies, which actually has the Cleveland Browns doing something positively, Draft Day. We live in a different world than we did a year ago when Leon signed his extension. Evan Bouchard signed for 4 years. Connor McDavid has a year left on his deal. I would not be surprised if his extension is not the max, and that's not a reflection on Edmonton whatsoever. It's a reflection of the changing cap world, and what Stan Bowman said pointedly is it has to be good for the player as well as the team for a deal to make it work both in the short term and in the long term.
Yeah, and I really think it's going to be up to Connor McDavid. I think he just decides, here's what I need, and here's the term. That's kind of how the negotiations go. I mean, in a perfect world, yeah, you would love to see an 8-year extension, but Judd Moldaver has Connor now. He did 4- and 5-year deals with Austin Matthews in the past, and we just saw Bouchard from the same agency, Wasserman, that Moldaver's with, do a 4-year extension. Now, we do believe that there was probably an external threat that accelerated the process to get the thing done for Evan, and I'm with Jack. I too have not spoken to Connor, but my guess is it's at the end of the day it's really going to be up to the Wasserman and McDavid camp. Well,
it's a wait and see approach for Oil Country as they hope that this team can lock up their captain, and to quote Draft Day, God, I love this job. Thanks for joining us, guys, on the panel presented by Sportsnet.